I never imagined I'd be telling this story, but here I am. My name is Diane. I'm 63 years old, and my husband John and I have been married for over 35 years. We've been through a lot together, raising kids, dealing with career ups and downs, and enjoying our retirement. But there's one experience we had recently that I never saw coming, and I can't stop thinking about it. Let me take you back to the night that changed everything. It all started about 6 months ago. John and I were sitting on the couch after dinner, sipping wine, reminiscing about old times. We'd always had a great relationship, both emotionally and physically. Over the years, we've kept things exciting in the bedroom, trying new things every now and then. But that night, he suggested something, completely out of the ordinary. He looked at me with a mischievous smile and said, "Diane, I've been thinking about something that might be fun for both of us." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "What's that?" I asked, leaning in closer. His eyes sparkled as he said, "I want to see you with 2 younger men." At first, I was shocked, completely taken aback. I mean, sure, we'd been adventurous before, but this? It was something I had never even considered. I didn't know what to say at first. My mind raced with questions. Was he serious? Did he really want this? And, if I'm honest with myself, a part of me was curious. The idea was thrilling, in a strange way. After all, I hadn't been with anyone other than John for decades. But then another thought hit me. Was this really what he wanted? Was it about him, or was it something more? We spent the next few days talking about it. John was gentle and patient. He assured me that it wasn't about him wanting anything to change between us, or being unhappy. He just thought it could be a fun experience, something to spice up our lives and our relationship in a way we hadn't tried before. It took me a while to get used to the idea. I mean, I'm not young anymore, and I wasn't sure if 2 younger men would even find me attractive. But John kept telling me how beautiful I was, how sexy he still found me, and how this fantasy wasn't about my age. It was about sharing an intimate, exciting moment together. Eventually, after days of thought and a bit of excitement building within me, I agreed. We both decided to take things slow, find the right people, and make sure everything felt comfortable and safe. John handled all the arrangements, and I trusted him completely. A few weeks later, the night finally arrived. I was nervous, but also oddly excited. John had invited 2 men in their late 30s. Both were attractive, confident, and clearly eager to please. We had dinner first, a few drinks to loosen up, and the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. As the night went on, the tension in the room became almost palpable. I could feel their eyes on me, and it was thrilling. John sat close to me, his hand resting on my thigh, gently stroking it as he whispered in my ear, telling me how beautiful I looked. And then one of the men reached out, lightly brushing his hand along my arm. I looked at John, and he gave me a reassuring nod, his eyes filled with excitement. The touch was electrifying. Before I knew it, the other man was sitting on the other side of me, his hand on my lower back, slowly moving up towards my shoulder. It started slowly, innocently even. Light touches, soft kisses on my neck and shoulders. The feeling of being the center of attention from not just 1, but 2 men was overwhelming in the best way possible. I felt alive, desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. Their kisses became more passionate, their hands exploring my body with a confidence that made me shiver. John sat across from us, watching intently, his eyes never leaving mine. He looked happy, thrilled even. It was like we were sharing this secret, intimate moment together, even though he wasn't physically involved. Soon, their hands were everywhere. My blouse slipped off my shoulders, and I felt their lips on my skin, soft, warm, and urgent. One of them kissed me deeply, his tongue exploring my mouth, while the other's hands moved lower, sending waves of pleasure through me. I could hear John breathing heavily in the background, clearly enjoying every second of this. I couldn't believe how much I was enjoying it too. The sensation of being kissed, touched, and caressed by two men at once was something I never thought I'd experience. But there I was, lost in the moment, completely immersed in the pleasure. The night was a blur of passion and excitement. Every kiss, every touch felt like it was bringing me closer to something I couldn't even put into words. I felt free, liberated in a way I hadn't been in years. And through it all, John was right there, watching, encouraging, and loving me in his own way. When it was over, the men left, and it was just John and me again. We didn't speak for a while, just lay there together, holding each other, our hearts still racing. Finally, he kissed me softly and whispered, "Thank you." I smiled, feeling closer to him than I ever had before. Looking back on that night, I'm still amazed by how much it brought us together. It wasn't just about the physical experience. It was about trust, intimacy, and sharing something completely new with the person I've loved for decades. It's not something I ever thought I'd do, and I'm not sure if we'll ever do it again. But that night, I realized that even at 63, there are still new adventures to be had, new ways to connect, and new ways to feel alive. It's a night I'll never forget, and one that brought me and my husband even closer together. So if there's one thing I've learned, it's that relationships are all about communication, trust, and sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone. I'm not saying this experience is for everyone, but for us, it was the adventure of a lifetime. You might think by now that we've experienced it all, but what happened a few months ago completely turned my world upside down. It was one of those quiet evenings at home, the kind of night where the conversation drifts effortlessly between topics, our children, old memories, and our future plans. But on this particular night, John decided to introduce something unexpected. We were sitting on the couch, his hand casually resting on mine. The conversation turned to the past, how things had changed, and how we'd always managed to keep the spark alive between us. Then he brought it up again, the fantasy he had shared with me earlier in the week, one that left me breathless and shocked when he first mentioned it. He smiled at me, a bit nervously this time, as though he was unsure whether I had really considered it. "Diane," he began, "I've been thinking about what we talked about before, about seeing you with other men. I think maybe it's something we should try." The words hung in the air. I could feel my heartbeat quicken as the weight of what he was suggesting settled over me. I'd already thought about it, more than I wanted to admit. The idea of being with two younger men was still shocking, but there was a part of me that was undeniably intrigued. And then came the doubt. At my age, would I even be appealing to men in their 30s? I had the insecurities that come with aging, the softening of my body, the lines on my face, the gray hairs. I wasn't the young woman I once was, but John had always reassured me, making me feel as beautiful and desirable as ever. Still, the question nagged at me. Why did he want this? Was he bored of me? Was this about him, or was it something he thought I wanted? I couldn't quite figure it out. But John, always sensitive to my feelings, noticed my hesitation. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable," he said softly, squeezing my hand. "It's just a fantasy, something different. But only if you want to, Diane. I'd never push you." Despite my reservations, there was something alluring about the idea. A new experience, something completely outside of our normal, safe world. And the way John framed it, it was about trust, about opening up to something exciting. He reassured me that this wasn't about dissatisfaction. He still adored me, wanted me, and loved our life together. This was about exploration. Over the next week, we talked about it more and more. I began to open up, asking him questions, testing my boundaries, trying to figure out if I was truly interested or just humoring his desires. What I discovered surprised me. I was curious. More than that, I was excited. John explained that it wasn't just the act itself. He wanted to witness me being adored, desired by other men, while knowing I was completely his at the end of the night. There was something about the idea of watching me come alive in the hands of others that fueled his fantasy. And as he spoke, I realized it was starting to fuel mine too. After a few long discussions, and I admit, a few nights of very passionate lovemaking after talking about it, I finally said yes. I agreed to try it, but only if we took it slow and made sure we found people who would respect our boundaries. John's face lit up like I'd given him the greatest gift in the world. He kissed me deeply, whispering how much he loved me and how incredible this would be for both of us. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully embrace the idea. I was going to do this, not just for him, but for me too. We decided to look for 2 younger men in their 30s who would be respectful, mature, and, of course, attractive. John took the lead in finding them. He went online, discreetly navigating sites, screening candidates, and making sure they knew exactly what we were looking for. I trusted him completely with the process. The anticipation started to build. As the day approached, I found myself thinking about it constantly. What would they look like? How would it feel to be touched by them, kissed by them? I'd been with John and John alone for so many years. The idea of 2 strangers exploring my body was as terrifying as it was thrilling. And I didn't want to overthink it, but I couldn't help it. In the week leading up to the night, I found myself shopping for lingerie, something I hadn't done in ages. I wanted to feel sexy, empowered. I chose a black lace set that hugged my curves in all the right places. When I showed it to John, his eyes lit up, and I knew I'd made the right choice. The night finally arrived. My heart was racing as I got ready, applying my makeup with shaky hands. I had the oddest sensation of feeling both incredibly self-conscious and completely liberated. When I walked out into the living room, dressed in a sleek black dress with my new lingerie underneath, John's reaction calmed my nerves. His eyes were filled with admiration and love. He kissed me on the forehead and whispered, "You look stunning." At around 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. My stomach flipped. John answered the door, and in walked 2 men, David and Marcus. Both were in their mid-30s, just as we'd arranged. They were attractive, confident, but also respectful. They greeted me warmly with wide smiles and polite compliments, immediately putting me somewhat at ease. We shared a bottle of wine, the conversation flowing surprisingly easily. David was charming, with a mischievous glint in his eye, while Marcus was more reserved but equally engaging. They were clearly interested, but they also let me take the lead, not wanting to rush anything. As the evening progressed, the tension between us began to build. John sat next to me, his hand resting on my knee, occasionally squeezing it in reassurance. I could feel the men's eyes on me, and it was intoxicating. I'd never felt so desired in my life, not by 1 man, but by 3. After another glass of wine, Marcus leaned forward, his fingers lightly brushing my arm. His touch sent a jolt through me, like electricity. I glanced at John, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. My heart raced as I leaned into Marcus, letting him kiss me softly on the lips. The sensation was overwhelming. His lips were warm and gentle, yet firm. It was so different from John's kisses, but just as thrilling. As Marcus's kiss deepened, David moved closer, placing his hand on my lower back, his touch sending shivers down my spine. Within moments, I was caught between them. Their hands explored my body slowly, deliberately, and I let them. Marcus kissed my neck, his breath hot against my skin, while David's fingers traced the curve of my waist, his lips brushing my shoulder. I could feel my body responding in ways I hadn't felt in years, alive, buzzing with energy. Their touch wasn't just physical. It was awakening something deep inside me, something that had been dormant for far too long. John watched from across the room, his eyes glued to me. I could feel his presence, his excitement, and that only heightened my own. It was strange, exhilarating, being with these 2 men while knowing John was right there, watching loving me through it all. Before I knew it, David's lips were on mine again, more insistent this time. His hand slid down my arm and settled on my hip, pulling me closer to him. At the same time, Marcus's hands explored my thighs, his breath heavy against my ear. Every touch, every kiss was more intense than the last. I felt like I was drowning in the sensation, completely lost in the moment. And then, things escalated. David's fingers slid the strap of my dress off my shoulder, exposing the lace of my lingerie. His eyes widened in appreciation, and he leaned in, pressing hot kisses against my bare skin. Marcus, not to be outdone, kissed his way down my collarbone, his hand gently tracing the outline of my body. At that moment, I felt completely liberated, desired by two younger men, while my husband watched, enthralled by every movement. David pulled me toward him, his hands firm on my waist as he kissed me deeply. Meanwhile, Marcus's lips roamed lower, his hands trailing fire along my sides. My body responded eagerly, every nerve ending alive with the sensation of their touch. I felt free, unburdened by age or doubt, basking in the attention of these men who wanted nothing more than to make me feel beautiful, cherished, and desirable. As things progressed, my mind drifted back to John. I turned to look at him, and what I saw only heightened my desire. His eyes were locked on me, filled with admiration, excitement, and love. He wasn't just a spectator, he was a part of this experience in a way that words couldn't describe. It was as if he was living through me, sharing every kiss, every touch. The night continued with a rhythm I hadn't anticipated, slow, deliberate, yet filled with an urgency that left me breathless. David and Marcus were attentive, their focus entirely on me, and I reveled in the attention. We moved from the couch to the bedroom, the three of us tangled in a web of passion, with John watching closely, his eyes. The intensity of the moment continued to build, with every touch, every kiss deepening the connection between us. The room was filled with the soft sounds of breath and whispered words, and I felt completely enveloped in the passion that surrounded me. David's hands were on my back, his lips on my neck, while Marcus held my hand, his kisses trailing down my arm. And through it all, John watched with a quiet, burning intensity. His presence anchored me, reminding me that this was as much about us as it was about the experience itself. I glanced at him once more, our eyes locking for a long moment. In that gaze, I could see his love, his trust, and his joy in seeing me so alive, so free. The night reached a crescendo, a blur of pleasure and emotion that left me breathless. It wasn't just the physical sensation, it was the feeling of being desired, cherished, and connected to my husband in a way that was beyond words. I had never imagined something like this would bring us closer, but there we were, on the other side of an experience that would forever change us. As the night wound down, David and Marcus were respectful, thanking us for the evening and quietly slipping out, leaving just John and me in the quiet of our home. The energy in the room was still palpable, but now it was just the two of us. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart still racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. John came over, kneeling in front of me. He took my hands in his, looking up at me with that same love and admiration I had always known. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice full of concern and tenderness. I nodded, smiling at him. "I'm more than okay," I whispered. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly, and we stayed like that for a long time, simply basking in the aftermath of what we had just shared. There were no words needed between us, just the understanding that something powerful had just happened. That night changed us. It wasn't just about the physical act, it was about trust, vulnerability, and exploring a new facet of our relationship together. I never imagined I'd be in a situation like this at 63, but life has a way of surprising you. And sometimes those surprises lead to a deeper understanding of yourself and your partner. In the weeks that followed, John and I were closer than ever. We talked more openly about our desires, our fantasies, and our love for each other. What happened that night wasn't just an indulgence. It was a moment that brought us closer, made us stronger. Would I do it again? Maybe. But what I know for sure is that I've never felt more connected to my husband than I do now. Our relationship was built on years of love and trust, and this experience only added another layer to that. As for the fantasy, it was thrilling, it was intense, and it was unforgettable. But more than anything, it reminded me that age is just a number. Passion, love, and connection don't fade with time. They only grow stronger, especially when you're willing to embrace new experiences together. So that was the night that changed everything for John and me. It wasn't what I expected, but it was exactly what we needed. It brought us closer in ways I never thought possible, and reminded me that there's always something new to discover, even after decades together. Thanks for listening to my story. It's one I'll never forget.